What's going on, you guys? It's Dave, and today we're back with another ranking video. So I know I haven't really ranked a lot of fighting franchises in these ranked videos, but I figured I'd start doing more because the fighting genre is quite literally my favorite genre when it comes to video games. And when it comes to my favorite franchises within the fighting genre, I can't think of any other than Dead or Alive. Now, Dead or Alive has been around for quite some while now. I believe the first title being brought to us back in 1998, but of course it did not reach the United States until 1999 and 2000. All right, this game has went to spawn multiple titles and even spin-offs, and luckily for y'all, I have actually played them all. So without further ado, let's start the ranking. Alright guys, so here we have the list of all the Dead or Alive games and their spin-offs. Okay, a couple of them I put down here in the never played tier because I've never played Venus Vacation. That was a online game, and I had already played all the other Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball, so I didn't really get into this much because it was just yet a spin-off of Dead or Alive Extreme 3 over here, so I did not play that. And also I didn't play Dead or Alive Dimensions because Dead or Alive Dimensions was on Nintendo DS, and I never owned a Nintendo DS, so I didn't even know that existed. All right, so now we're going to start with, just the list in chronological order. So first we have the original Dead or Alive. Now this came out in 1998, I believe, or 1999. All right, and this came out for arcades, but I believe it was 1998 actually that this came out in. Yeah, and this was on arcades exclusively in Japan. All right, and then the next year, 1999, this was ported to Sega Dreamcast and PlayStation 1. Now what I liked about this game was that, first and foremost, it was just the pioneer to this soon to be very, very big gaming series, all right. And then, for the time, it introduced new mechanics like, fighting mechanics, such as grapples and stuff like that. That wasn't really all too common when it came to arcade fighters, right? The cast was unique and the story itself was unique. So I'm going to put that in 8 tier simply because it was not my favorite, but, it gave the series such a strong start, and I have to respect that. All right, next we have Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore. Now, Dead or Alive 2, it's had multiple renditions. So, for example, this was the exclusive PlayStation 2 port of Dead or Alive 2. So, it was the original Dead or Alive 2. Then it was the Dead or Alive 2 Plus that came out on Sega Dreamcast. And then it was DOA 2 Hardcore that came out on PlayStation 2. All right. And, this just took the game to a whole nother level. So not only did it have more technological advantages, over its predecessor, also what they did was they introduced even more mechanics such as counter grapples and things like that, just taking all the mechanics to a whole nother level. The graphics were good for what, for that time being in 2000. It was just literally pushing all of the video game consoles graphical hardware to its limits. Okay, so I love Dead or Alive 2, but once again, it was not my favorite in the series, but that's still gonna get an A. All right, next we have Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. Now, me and my big sister used to play this a lot. Okay, we were huge fans of this, so that's going in the S tier. It was just a lighthearted spin-off of the Dead or Alive series. All right, so basically the plot is that all the girls that are playable in the Dead or Alive games previously, they all are on an island owned by the fighter from the Dead or Alive series named Zach. The black guy with the shades. And basically, he wins a whole bunch of money and he buys an island and he tricks the girls. He tells them that there's going to be a fighting tournament there. But instead, when they show up, it's just a awesome, fun beach resort. He just wants them to hang out for a couple of weeks. So basically, you can do things like obviously volleyball. It's a co-op game as well. So, there's multiple mini games and stuff to do. You can race, foot race, flag race. You can do pool hopping. It's just so much fun things to do in the game. So that is going in S tier. Put countless hours into it, and it had amazing soundtrack as well. All right, next we have Dead or Alive 3. Now, Dead or Alive 3 was the very first Dead or Alive game that I ever owned. All right, and this is what cemented me as a fan in the series. You had tag battles now. The story even expands even further. And this is probably my favorite part of the story in the series. The ninjas is basically like a ninja civil war. Kasumi, the main character, she runs away. She's being hunted by her old clan. The same things that happened in number 1, but they're trickling in number 3. And it seems like 3's story hit like a boiling point. Okay, so Dead or Alive 3 is definitely getting S tier, more costumes, even better mechanics, even better beautiful environments and interactive environments. You can knock people into different parts of the stage now. You can crash people through walls and glass walls and things like that. It was just very, very much more in depth. All right. So that is definitely going in the S tier. All right, next we have Dead or Alive Ultimate. Now, Dead or Alive Ultimate was really just a remake or remaster of Dead or Alive 1 and Dead or Alive 2, and it was just put into one video game. All right, so what the Team Ninja developers did was that they used the engine that they used to make Dead or Alive 3 to make this remaster here. So it was Dead or Alive 2, but just much more graphically better. All right, even more costumes and things like that. Basically, Team Ninja just said, hey, Dead or Alive 2 had potential, so let's just bring it to its fullest. Next, we have Dead or Alive 4. Now, Dead or Alive 4 was the very first Dead or Alive that reached the next generation of consoles, which was Xbox 360. It's an Xbox 360 exclusive, so it never came out on any other console. Because at this time, by the time Dead or Alive 3 came out, Dead or Alive, this Dead or Alive series was Xbox exclusive for like a while. All right, so Dead or Alive 3 and 4 and Extreme Beach Volleyball, all these, were Xbox exclusives. Okay, and basically what happened in Dead or Alive 4 is that some characters we haven't seen in a while make a comeback. Now this is where the story kind of takes a dip a little bit. I wasn't really able to follow the story all that well, because I didn't really play it for the story itself. I would just play for the online play or the local versus battles with friends or even online. Okay, but for what Dead or Alive 4 was altogether, I'm giving it an S tier because I was so happy to see that Dead or Alive made a return, and it was literally like one of the launch titles for the Xbox 360 because this came out in 2005, and it was just graphically enhanced in every way. And the Xbox 360 now having 720p graphics instead of the 480 and even 540p graphics, this was a major upgrade in every way. So I was glad to see that. Next, we have Dead or Alive Extreme 2. Now, Dead or Alive Extreme 2, I'm not going to lie, it was, it had more features, it was more fun, but I just didn't really have fun with this one like I did the original Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball. So, yeah, you had jet skis, you had even more things you can do with the girls, like, they can do, like, pole dances and stuff like that now. You can do photo shoots with the girls. You can do even more little mini games and stuff, like I said, for example, jet skiing, butt war and stuff like that. You can just try to hip bump people into the water, stuff like that. Just had much more mini games, and basically, it was cool for what it was, but like I said, it was just kind of missing something for me, but it was still not too bad to play. So I played it here and there, but I didn't play it like I played the original beach volleyball, so that's going in B tier. Next, we have Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. Now, Dead or Alive 5 Last Round, I know some of you may disagree that it belongs in the S tier, and I'm willing to hear the reasons why. I'm willing to hear that, but for me personally, this was probably the Dead or Alive game that I put the most hours into. I've had the most fun with friends. I remember I forgot all about the Dead or Alive series until one day my friend bought this and invited me over to play. We were on that shit for hours, because that's just how fun it was. And I love to see the roster. I love to see that, this was the game, the first Dead or Alive that was on the next generation of consoles like Xbox One and PlayStation 4. All right. So, yeah, that was pretty awesome to see, right? So yeah, that is definitely going in S tier for me. I just love the characters. I love the roster. I love the, additional characters, even some characters coming from other series is like, and franchises like Virtua Fighter. They have Jackie in there, Akira, so it's nice to see those characters from different franchises making cameo appearances. And they're actually very good fighters in the series. So that's going S tier. Next, we have Dead or Alive Extreme 3. And honestly, y'all, I'm going to put this in C tier. If you don't like that, I understand, but I'm going to tell you why. First of all, the game was basically just a big tease to me, okay? Because first of all, it did not come out in America. They didn't even release a westernized version, which means there was no English voiceover dub version. It was just only the Japanese dub, and you could do English subtitles, which was cool. I literally had to order this off of eBay to play it. you know, because like I said, I could not find it anywhere in the Western market because it wasn't released here. All right. And then secondly, you needed an Asian PlayStation account to buy downloadable content, which would overall make this game more fun and more characters. And I wouldn't even know where to start getting a damn Asian PlayStation. I wouldn't even know where to start with that shit. So I wasn't able to enjoy this game in its entirety. It was just basically the shell of the game that I was playing. I played it, you know, the graphics were cool. You know, the fan service was cool. You know, if you like fan service, it's pretty cool in this game. You know, the girls that were playable in the most recent Dead or Alive title, Dead or Alive 5, those new characters are now introduced in this game, so you can play as them. You know, it's the same thing as the other two. You know, you're on a vacation for a couple of weeks, you're on Zack Island, things like that. You know, just bullshit for a couple of weeks and just do all the stuff that they can do. You know, there was, you know, even more mini games as well, like rock climbing and stuff like that now. So yeah, it was cool, but it got real old real fast. All right, so that's going into C tier. Next, we have Dead or Alive 6. Now, Dead or Alive 6, I'm not gonna lie, that's okay. See, now I'm gonna struggle with this because I liked it, but I didn't like it that much. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna put this on B tier, okay, because it wasn't as bad of an experience I had with Dead or Alive Extreme 3, but you know, it still was not on par with all my other favorites here. All right, Dead or Alive 6's story is probably the most confusing story that in the series, in my opinion. And this game, right, was just one of the main nails in the coffin as far as people believing that the Dead or Alive series has officially died. You know, they're thinking that Dead or Alive is dead. You know, and this game right here was one of the main reasons why the fan base thought that we may not be getting a Dead or Alive 7. But there is talk about a reboot to the series, so I can't wait to see that. And I really hope that's the case, because if they rebooted this series with better writing, you know, this game would probably be unstoppable. All right, because it's not very often we see fighting games with good lore. You know, it's interesting lore and it's expansive lore, but it's not interesting. So that'll be awesome to see. All right, you guys, so that's going to do it for my list of best to worst, the Dead or Alive series. Let me know what your favorite ones were. Let me know which one made you a fan. Like I said, the ones in all the S tier, these solidify me as fans, no doubt. All right, but let me know what your favorites were. All right, and that's going to do it for me. Once again, it's been your boy David, and I'm out. Peace.